and like Homero said, while we work at different universities, we tend to work together a lot. Homero is great with production, and so is Mohan. We value their expertise, and while I have knowledge of production, my expertise is actually in the finance side of things, the budgets, the money, costs, how to figure out if we're making any money in farming, which is challenging at times. And so I've been asked to talk today. I think I've got the right one going. Maybe not. Let's see. I think I got the right one going. We got head nods. You're seeing the right screen.
Cost of feeding pregnant animals, yes.
Okay, and you're not seeing the
No.
speaker slides, right? Ah, perfect. Okay. So yeah, so I like to work on the number side of things. And as I also like to work with sheep and goats, I particularly love sheep and goats and have managed both sheep and goat herds. We had goats on the farm for about 15 years, and they ate everything they wanted to eat on the farm. And now we currently have sheep on the farm because when we got goats, we didn't have grass. And now we have a lot more grass than anything else. So enough about me. I've been asked today to talk about the cost of feeding pregnant animals. And Homero, this is one of the hardest topics you've given me, to be honest with you. I had to go down in order to figure out the cost of things. We've got to know the production side of things. And so I had to drill down into a lot of nutrition, and we'll briefly talk about some of that. So feeding livestock, feeding is probably one of our largest costs associated with livestock production. You look at any budgets, and feed costs can be as much as 60% of the cost of raising and having livestock for the year. But on the flip side of that, it's probably one of the most important management aspects for livestock production, because if we don't get the feed right, then everything else becomes a mess in production wise. And so as we look at that, and kind of to reiterate the importance of feed costs and how much everybody thinks about it, and not just the cost of feed, but also getting the right proper nutrients to our animals, there are a lot of calculators out there from all kinds of different agencies on how to get this right and to help people on their farm figure out what rations they can feed, or what type of grain they can feed, or if they have corn, then what do they need to supplement the corn with to get the right nutrient to the animal. And all that to say is that nutrient needs are super important, and they vary based on the production aspects of the animal. And so we have kind of four categories, really three categories and one extra, four categories of animals and their nutrient needs. So our maintenance, these are going to be your mature animals. It's kind of the baseline of nutrition that we need to maintain an animal. And we consider these mature animals that are not growing and that are not pregnant or lactating or any of those things. So these are mature dry animals. And then we also have a growth category, and these are immature animals that are still growing themselves, and they tend to need extra nutrition while they're growing. And that nutrition that they need is to build the muscle and bone and internal organs and skin and all the things that they need to be growing. Our next category is our reproduction category. And these animals that are in some sort of phase of reproduction, whether that is the breeding, that should say breeding instead of flushing, whether that is actual breeding or gestation or lactation, so pregnancy or milking, these animals all need higher planes of nutrition. And the highest plane of nutrition or nutritional needs really comes during lactation. And the number of animals that mom is nursing really influences how much nutrition they need. Meaning that if they've got a single animal nursing, then they need less nutrition than an animal that has two babies nursing. And if we combine that with growth, so let's say we have an immature doe and she is still growing and yet she's pregnant, or maybe she's already had her babies and she's nursing, you know, that just kind of compounds the nutritional needs for that animal. And that last category really is weather. Anytime it gets cold or hot or any of the crazy influences that we have in our weather, that will affect the nutritional needs of the animal. Anytime it's cold and the animal needs to produce more heat to stay warm, that increases their maintenance requirements. And if they're still growing, it obviously increases their nutritional needs as well. So some economically important traits that I kind of wanted to talk to you about because it all plays a role with nutrition and the cost of feeding animals. We have reproductive efficiency. And so this really is how well an animal is able to reproduce the next generation. How early she starts, so the age at puberty, how early she is able to get pregnant and carry her first baby. Her fertility, so with sheep and goats, we like to see them have twins. And fertility is kind of a part of that. Is she having singles? Is she having twins? Is she having triplets? So on and so forth. And then, of course, the birth rate. Not only do we want her to get pregnant, we also want her to maintain that pregnancy. And so birth rate then comes from how many animals are actually born from that mom. And all of these things are very strongly influenced by nutrition and body condition score, which is that BCS you see there. Body condition score is influenced by nutrition. It's kind of a result of the nutrition. Growth rate is another economically important trait, and this essentially is just how fast those young animals are growing. We take into effect the maternal milk, so how much milk mom produces, the quality of the milk mom produces, the nutrition that animal gets after we're done milking, after we're done nursing, and genetics. Genetics play a big role in growth rate. But this is also strongly influenced by maternal nutrition because maternal nutrition affects how much and how good mom's milk is. And then we have carcass merit, and this is essentially cutability. It's the meat to fat ratio that we find on a carcass. And we find that offspring with high growth rates generally have high cutability. And this trait is super important because essentially if we're producing meat animals, this is what we're getting paid to produce. This is kind of our final product that we're producing. And so throughout this talk, we're really going to talk about how do we balance the nutritional needs of the animals with the cost of providing those nutritional needs. And from my perspective as an economist, I really think of this as balancing our expenses and our revenue, because nutritional needs directly influence production and directly influence our revenue, and the feed costs directly influence our expenses. And Homero, I am ready for that first poll if you are. And so the first question is, which animal has the highest nutritional needs? A 6-month-old growing lamb, a 3-year-old dry ewe, a 13-month-old ewe that is nursing twins, and a 4-year-old ewe that is nursing a single. Looks like we're at about 60% of people have participated. We'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. All right, so you guys are paying attention today. 100%, yes, that 13-month-old ewe that's nursing twins is going to have the highest nutritional needs. And that's just because she is still growing. So she has the higher needs from growing, and she's lactating. So she has those higher needs from lactating. And out of all of these animals, she's going to have the highest nutritional needs because of the growth and the lactation. So get that off the screen. All right. So nutrition really comes from a couple different places. One of the best places that we can get our nutrition for our animals is from pasture or browse. And we really want to see that growing. We want to see good healthy pasture or good healthy browse. Another place that we can get our nutrition from is hay and stored forage. You'll hear me call that stored forage a lot. And essentially we just harvested the forage during the growing season because we had too much of it during the growing season and stored it for later, which is why I call it stored forage. The other big place that we get our nutrition from is grains. And while I have pellets here on the screen, keep in mind that pellets generally are a mixture of different grains that have been steam heat treated and then pressed into these pellet shapes. So they're all mixed up really well. Like I mentioned, the pasture and browse, this is really going to be our best source of nutrition as long as it's actively growing and we're properly managing it. If we've got dead grass out there, it may not be the best source of nutrition. Conversely, if we've got dead browse out there, it may not be the best source of nutrition. And keep in mind that weather always plays a role on whether our pasture is in good shape or not. So how the heck do we know if we're meeting the nutritional needs of these animals? Well, I'm not going to go into the details per se of nutritional needs of different classes. I'm the economist, so I'm going to talk about the money, but I did want to mention where we find this information. And so the National Resource Council has provided, in 2007, provided an update on their nutrient requirements for small ruminants. And this goes through and talks about all of the different weight classes and growth classes and production classes of all of our different animals, our small ruminants, and some of our camels, mind you, and will tell us exactly what they need as far as total nutrients and protein and energy and all of their micronutrients and macronutrients, so all the minerals and things that they need and vitamins. This is pretty tough to read if you're not a nutritionist. And so I highly recommend that you might be familiar with these things, but I leave it to the people that have done it, right, to understand that. One of the easier ways to know if we're meeting the nutritional needs of these animals is by paying attention to their body condition score. And I assume that y'all have talked about body condition scoring in here. We tend to use it a lot, especially in sheep and goats. And essentially, it's just a way to know if our animals are too fat, too thin, or just right. And we do that by kind of checking the amount of muscle and fat cover that they might have over their spine and over their hips and also along their ribs. And so this particular guide sheet was for scoring sheep. We have another one for scoring goats. And it's the same process. This particular goat was really thin, too thin. But again, we're going to look at the back, the spine, the hips, and in goats, we're actually going to look at the sternum, so underneath the breastbone, to see how much fat cover is there. And how do we, when we're getting it right, a lot of things go right when we get nutrition right. So we've got healthy animals, we've got healthy adults, we're not over or underweight. We've got good reproduction rates and milk production, we've got good growth rates on our young animals, and we've got good carcass characteristics. And so as you look at some of these animals in these pictures, keep in mind that some of them are probably a little overweight. Some of these are probably show animals. That they like to see in a little better flesh than we do in our production animals. But these young goats here on the bottom left, these are growing animals, and while they could be probably use a little more condition, they're not bad for growing animals. But what happens when we get it wrong? When we get the nutrition wrong and we don't provide enough nutrition, we start to see low conception rates. We start to see low birth weights. We might have decreased offspring vigor. So they just don't get up and stand and nurse very quickly. We start to see lower survival rates of the babies that are born. Mom won't produce much colostrum or milk. And so therefore we start to see lower growth rates of those animals. I also found as I was digging through and looking at the research for some of these things is that we actually see the lower lifetime production in the F1 ewe lambs. And I think that's supposed to say F2 ewe lambs, by the way. So what that essentially means is F1 would be the daughters of the moms who had that were nutritionally compromised. They didn't get enough nutrition. And then F2 are actually the granddaughters of the mom who didn't get enough nutrition. And so what we seem to find, what they have found in here is that during gestation, if we don't have enough nutrition during gestation, then it starts to mess with how the hormones and all the physiological needs of that animal that is being grown, of how they go on to produce later. And so we do see that lower lifetime production of the ewe lambs coming after that. We also can see some increase in internal parasites. When we don't have proper nutrition and the animal is considered under stress, those internal parasites tend to be opportunistic and start causing problems. And then again, we also have pregnancy toxemia or ketosis. And essentially we have an imbalance in nutritional needs. So the animal needs more nutrition than it's getting, and she gets really sick during pregnancy. And oftentimes we lose the lambs when that happens, and potentially even the mom. So what if we get it wrong and we provide too much nutrition? Well, we see some of the similar things. We have lower conception rates. We tend to have high incidences of prolapse. That could be vaginal or rectal prolapse. We tend to have high birth weights, which can cause some dystocia, which is just essentially problems during birthing. We get higher fat tissue and some metabolic alterations in our F1 and F2 lambs, meaning that even in our granddaughters from the ewe that had too much nutrition, she's got too much fat in her body, and then it's causing some metabolic problems, and she's just not going to grow well, and she's not going to have good cutability. We also have, again, the pregnancy toxemia or ketosis issues because it's harder to maintain a heavier ewe with the nutrition that she's getting towards the end of pregnancy. And then we also get decreased offspring vigor or survival. Those babies just aren't very vigorous when they are born. Mom's not very vigorous during labor. She tends to get tired, and it causes some survival issues in her babies. So this, I think it's all right. I said this might be hard to see, but I think it's all right. And so essentially kind of what we're looking at on this chart is the nutrient needs for a 154-pound mature ewe. And so keep in mind that when this ewe is dry and she's not breeding, bred, or lactating, this is kind of a standard maintenance for a 154-pound mature ewe. And what you're looking at here is this orange is a percent protein, and the percentages are on this right-hand side. The gray is the percent total digestible nutrients that she needs. Again, percentages are on this right side. And this blue line is the dry matter and pounds that she needs throughout these cycles. And that's over here on the left-hand side. And really what I wanted to show you here is that between the different stages, we can have very different needs on these animals. You can see that TDN needs go from about 55% up to about 65%-ish. And so we're seeing these dramatic changes in our nutritional needs. Keep in mind, this was gestation, and then we have lactation on both of these. Protein really goes up with lactation, and so does dry matter in pounds. In the last 4 weeks of gestation, we tend to see a little bit lower dry matter than we do during lactation, simply because she doesn't have enough room between those growing babies and food. The rumen and the babies start competing for space in her belly cavity. And so I say all that to talk about we're trying to judge this on body condition scores. And so what we can see is that we know the numbers, and the numbers change throughout these different time periods of gestation and lactation. And we get over here to the body condition scores, and you can see how we might look at a different body condition score throughout the periods. And so during breeding, we're looking for about a body condition score of 3. Keep in mind, this is a scale of 1 to 5. And so about a 3, so a little above the average, which would be 2.5, right? 2.5 would be smack middle. And the reason we're doing that is because we actually want to see that ewe. That's when we would be flushing. We want to see that ewe or doe kind of gaining weight just a little bit in order to ovulate more eggs. And that really helps us go on down the road and have better birth rates.
You have a question over there, in the chat.
I don't think I can even see the chat. Let me see if I can find you.
Yeah, your nutrient chart goes to 14 weeks lactation. How does this translate dairy goats, especially in extended lactation?
So dairy goats are going to have their own chart. And keep in mind that this is going to be mostly meat goats that I'm talking about. So, Homero, you're more familiar with dairy. Do you know how that works in dairy?
Well, I think dairy will be depending very much of the yield of the milk that are producing, because milk production is very different to meat, and also it's like the milk potential, the ability to produce milk for the goats and the breed. Because you have like a kind of a crossbreed to be producing, I don't know how many pounds per year lactation, will be very different to a Saanen or to Alpine breed. So you have like a breed like a Saanen, Alpine, you should be balancing ratios like a dairy cattle, like will be very different. Um, so you need a specific chart, and you have it to be balancing. You have to take a lot of care in the dry period for the animal, or even in the last middle of the lactation, because you are reducing the lactation. It's not producing milk, but it's recovering the body weight that will be the reservoir energy for the starting lactation. In the dairy goats and the dairy cattle, in the first, in dairy goats, in the first probably 1 month and a half, your energy balance will be negative. You never will be getting enough food nutrients to the animals, to the energy that they need. So they will be getting body fat reserve to be giving the nutrient that they need. So will be very different to goats that are crossbreed, or to the meat the meat breeds. And that also applied to dairy sheep.
Mhm.
Mm.
Thanks, Homero. Where were we? So early gestation, we see this drop down. This 2+ you can kind of think of as 2.5. And we're okay with losing a little condition between breeding and early gestation. Doesn't have to happen, but we're okay if it does happen. Late gestation, you can see that we're increasing our body condition score. And remember that in late gestation, we're also increasing our nutrients. And so we're actually giving a little extra feed during late gestation to account for those growing babies and increasing our body condition score. Lambing and kidding is really where we want to see the highest body condition score on these animals. And essentially, we're just getting them prepared for that lactation, which is their highest needs. And so we're kind of building these animals up through gestation so that they are ready to go for lactation. And then we often see them lose body condition score back down to about a maintenance score. You can see the maintenance score and the weaning score are about the same. And we're okay with that too. We're okay seeing this normal fluctuation in their body condition scores. And Homero, I think we're ready for the next poll.
Let me see where I have it.
Fair enough. Well, maybe I can.
Yeah, no, I have it here. Sorry.
Okay.
Do you see?
Okay.
Mhm.
So true or false, underfed or overfed dams can cause production problems in future generations. I see I'm gonna have to make these questions more difficult for you guys. Y'all are on top of this.
Yeah, these people is very smart people. I mean,
Yeah, y'all are on top of this. All right. I think we can end the poll. And so, yes, that is true. We can cause problems in future generations when we over or underfeed our dams. So,
Okay, sorry, okay,
no, you're good.
okay.
All right.
Yeah, I had to download the results because it's what I have to report to the ones
Yes.
that are paying this certification because somebody is paying. Yeah, in the risk management North Central.
Yes. They want to know that we're actually delivering knowledge.
Yeah. Mhm.
So when we think about nutrition, whether it's too much or too little, from an economics perspective, too little, it's like a loss of production, right? So if we don't provide enough nutrition, we have a loss of production. When we provide too much nutrition, we have a loss of production and an increase in cost, so a loss of money. And we don't really want either one of these things to happen. We kind of want the Goldilocks effects. We want it to be just right. And so how do we get it just right? We have to really understand and manage the nutrient needs during all stages, which we kind of briefly talked about. The nutrient content of feeds, which is where I am sorely lacking, and our livestock specialists tend to do a better job on this than I do. But those forages, whether it's growing or stored forages, we need to know the contents, the nutrient content of those and the supplements that we're providing, right? The corn, the soybeans, the mixes, any of those things. And then the other piece of that is the classes of animals. If we've got different stages of animals in one flock or herd, meaning we've got mature pregnant ewes or mature lactating ewes and immature pregnant or lactating ewe lambs or kids or okay, too many words, but you get it. We've got to manage those different stages. And then we always have to think about behavior. Because I don't know about you guys, but I have my chow hounds and they will push anybody and everybody out of the way. They are probably the biggest animals in the herd. And when I say biggest, I mean fattest. And they will knock some of those that are lower on the totem pole out of the way and compete for feed. And so we have to manage all of these things to just get it right. And in addition to that, all of these things have costs associated to them. And not always are the best things the least cost, right? And vice versa, not always are the best things the most cost. And so we've got to manage the price of these things too, or the cost of these things. And so making decisions, how the heck do we make decisions that balance the cost and the nutrients and the animals and all the things, right? One of the best ways is to gather a bit of information. I very much encourage people to test their hay and forage for the nutrient contents of it. That it provides a really great baseline of where to go from there. Oftentimes, we can get hay and forages that provide all the nutrients that our animals need, and we don't need to provide supplementation. But if we don't test, we don't know. So that's where I always encourage people to start. And then I always encourage people to learn what commodities or mixes are available in your area because it's going to be different based on your area that you live in and what's produced around you. And if we've got to truck a bunch of things in, then it's going to be more expensive than what's produced locally. I happen to live in an area that we don't really produce any grains of any kind. We are forage based and mountainous, and we don't really produce any commodities. And so it costs more to get commodities here than it does, say, in like central or northern Missouri where they're produced. And the other thing I would say is to work with a livestock specialist to help develop proper rations. I know our livestock specialist here at MU will take your nutrient test, your hay test analysis, and from there determine what kind of animals you have and help actually put together a mix that you could take to the feed mill and they could provide a commodity mix and tell you exactly how many pounds of that to feed to meet the nutrient needs of your animals. And that's one way to kind of be cost savings. And keep in mind that pasture is typically the cheapest options and commodities are generally cheaper than any mixes or pellets. But commodities, if you just get corn and beans and try to come home and mix it, that's a lot more to manage and there's a lot more room for error. And I will say that pellets tend to be easier to feed a complete, well, easier to feed. And the reason I say that is because sheep and goats are really good at picking out the pieces they like in our commodity mixes. And if we give it to them in pellet form, then they can't be so selective, right? They're going to get a nice bite, a nice complete bite in every bite. And I will also say that name brand or specialty feeds are typically the most expensive feeds we can feed our animals. And while there's less to manage here, a lot of that is oftentimes marketing. Okay, so keep in mind that the nutrients, the baseline nutrients are probably not different. Some of the supplements they add to them may be different. But a lot of that comes down to marketing, and we can add cost when we find value in it. All right, Homero, we're ready for poll number 3.
Let's go. Number 3.
So which statement is true? Feeding animals too much will increase our costs, and I can't read the whole thing, and affect production. Farmers need to balance nutrient needs, nutrient content of feed, and cost to be successful. Hay tests provide a good starting place for developing a feed ration, and all of the above. All right, I think everybody's answered. And like I said, y'all are on it tonight, 100%. All of the above statements are true. So we'll keep going. So I kind of wanted to step through some examples. And for these examples, I used our Missouri Crop and Livestock Enterprise budgets to make some calculations. Keep in mind that we have these budgets for beef and hogs and sheep and goats and lots of our commodities. And just wanted to kind of show you real quick the budgets that we have for sheep and goats. We have 2 budgets each. One is an early kidding and a late kidding. And for sheep, it's early lambing and late lambing. And so they just help you kind of think through the timing of your production practices and how those affect the bottom line. And with each of these, we have the budget, which would be a PDF, and we also have this Excel spreadsheet that you can go in and plug in your own numbers and kind of figure out where your budget looks like. And for these numbers, I just wanted to mention that I used the early lambing sheep budget, and that is a December, January lambing season. And so as we step through this example, all of these financial examples I'm going to show you have 50 ewes, and they run 1/2 acre per head per year, or 2 ewes per acre per year. So we're pretty understocked on this farm. We've got a lot of forage happening on this farm, but I kind of wanted to step through a couple examples. So what was happening in this farm in June, we're flushing these animals and we spend 14 days flushing. In July through September is considered early gestation, and there's 92 days in that period. In late gestation, it's November through December, and there's roughly 56 days in that period. Confined lambing happens December to January, and it's about 10 days of confined lambing. Our lactating ewes, they're lactating for a total of about 95 days with lambing and lactating. And so that occurs between December to March. And then March to June, we have our open ewes. And in this example, we feed hay during lambing and lactating, and so that's 95 days of hay feeding. We feed grain during flushing, late gestation, lambing, and lactating. Okay, so that's 165 days of grain feeding. Keep in mind those nutritional needs, right? The reason that we're feeding grain during flushing, late gestation, and lactation is because their needs are higher. And in this example, the hay does not meet their nutritional needs. As we step through here, we'll have one example with alfalfa, and you'll see how we adjust the grain based on the alfalfa, because alfalfa is one of our highest nutrient highest nutrition providing sources. Sorry. Got distracted by the chat. Okay, so in our example, we have 160, this first example, this is example one, we have $160 per ton mixed hay, $8.92 per hundredweight. CWT is hundredweight corn, and so this is just cracked corn for flushing, and they're getting half a pound a head for 14 days during flushing. We've got $37 per hundredweight of commercial pellet for late gestation and lambing, and they're getting half a pound a day for those 66 days of late gestation and lambing. For lactating, they're getting 2 pounds a day for those 85 days. And so as you can kind of see here, when we use this budget to put these numbers together, we've got a total of 0.19 acres of pasture per ewe, because this was a ewe of a lamb budget. And the reason that's a little higher is because we are putting some acreage on the ewes for their lambs when their lambs wean before they go to market. Okay, so there's a little bit more pasture acre per ewe. Average cost per ewe is $22.78 on those acres. And in hay, she's eating 528 pounds. She's not eating all of that if you actually calculate that out, but that does incorporate about a 12% waste on hay. And our average cost per ewe is $42.20 when we're feeding that 160 a ton mixed hay. And then in this particular ration, she's getting 221 pounds of grain across the year, and that's about $80 per ewe. And so her annual total feed costs are $144.50 on average for that herd, that flock of 50 ewes. So our example 2 is the alfalfa. And note that we have dropped our corn. Sorry, we're still flushing at a half pound a day for 14 days on our corn. But we have dropped our late gestation and lambing feed to about half a pound a day, and lactating feed to a pound a day. So we've dropped all of these in half. And also alfalfa hay costs more than our mixed hay. And so we're taking into account kind of the increase in cost in our alfalfa hay. But as you can see here, we've still got the 0.91 acres and the same cost on the pasture. Our hay actually increased to 605 pounds. We're feeding about 5 pounds of alfalfa a day to $60. And 131 pounds of grain. We've dropped our grain almost in half to $46. And our average annual cost on this set of ewes is $129 per ewe. In example 3, we are doing pasture only, okay? So we have found a way on this farm to take that 0.91 acres and get year-round pasture for our ewes. We are feeding some alfalfa hay for lambing, so that's 5 pounds per head per day for 10 days that we've got them in confined lambing. And we are still feeding the corn during flushing, and we are still providing some commercial pellet during late gestation and lactation. Okay, but not very much. You can see half a pound during late gestation and a pound during lactation. And this one reduces the cost even more. And this is probably one of those hard to reach goals, right, that I'd like everybody to try to reach for. If we can get to year-round grazing and provide enough forage out there for year-round grazing, it's pretty impressive how much that affects our total feed costs on the farm. And so we've got 56 pounds of hay going to these ewes per day at $5.60 per ewe, and 137 pounds of grain at almost $50 a head, for totaling a cost of $76. Now, I want to caution you, do not take these numbers home and give to your banker and be like, this is what my feed costs are going to cost, because that is not the case. These are examples to show a range of feed costs based on inputs and prices, right? I really just wanted to give you a feel of how these numbers can be so different based on what we're feeding and the timing of that feed. So your numbers will be very different. We've got quality and quantity and price. All of those things have to come into account. And every year is going to be different. We've had really high hay prices this last year. Hay was pretty hard to find in a lot of areas in Missouri. Grain prices, thankfully, aren't too bad. And so this year we're kind of able to use more grain than hay than what we do in previous years. When we had $9 corn and $9 bushel corn and, $18 beans, we didn't feed a lot of grain during those times, and we tried to really get by on good quality hay. So really the biggest difference in these budgets is how long can you remain on good quality pasture? And then the timing of reproduction and quality pasture. And what I mean by that is these budgets were all based on a December, January lambing. And if we lamb maybe a little later in the season and match a good quality forage to lactation, then that's going to adjust what these budgets look like as well. And so ideally, when we buy stored forages, when we buy hay, ideally, I would love to see everybody buy hay based on the nutrient quality of that hay. Everything would be hay tested, and we would price hay based on the nutrients that are in it. Unfortunately, in reality, that is just not how it works. We tend to purchase hay based on proximity and maybe price. We're probably, at least me, I don't know, probably not going to Iowa to get hay. I'll probably pay a little more here and deal with the poor quality and add some commodity mixes to provide the supplemental needs that I would need on my farm. But ideally, we would love to buy it based on the nutrient quality. And so some other best practices that I would love to see everybody doing is monitoring those body condition scores, and feeding to the body condition score that we would like to be seeing during the different activities throughout the year. The other thing that would be amazing, and I certainly can't do it on my farm, but maybe some of you can, is to feed like groups of like animals. And what I mean by that is if we've got ewe lambs, that we've got them in a separate pen and we're feeding them separate from our mature ewes. And keep in mind, this is kids and does as well, okay? I just get tongue-tied when I have too many words in there. Or if we're seeing lactating ewe lambs and lactating ewes, feeding them different because they're going to have different nutritional requirements. So having them in separate pens and feeding them different. I've even seen some guide sheets talk about ultrasounding and knowing how many babies that mama is carrying, and then separating by the number of offspring that are in utero. And so that we're feeding ewes or lambs or goats, ewes or does with twins in a different pen than we're feeding ewes or does with singles. So those are kind of best practices. And I'm not saying that would be easy to do, but that would make it easiest to meet the nutritional needs of the different groups of the animals. One more thing I wanted to show you, this is a chart out of the nutrient requirements of small ruminants. And this is their daily total digestible nutrients in pounds for a 200-pound mature ewe at different stages of production. And really what I wanted to point out is that while we go up a little bit with maintenance and breeding, this early gestation, late gestation, and early lactation between singles, twins, and triplets, and that's the number of lambs expected and reared, they can be pretty darn different. And so treating those ewes that are lactating, that are pregnant or lactating with twins, the same as we are with singles, we're going to see an increase in body condition score of those ewes or does carrying a single if we're trying to meet the proper nutrition of the ones with twins. And so all of this to say is that we want to get it just right? We want to have, we don't want to feed too much or too little because of the long-lasting effects of improper nutrition. And so those lower conception rates for multiple females, for multiple generations of females, is one of the really troublesome things that I actually came across in preparing for this presentation. And then the other big thing is altering that muscle fat ratio of future carcasses. And this would have an effect on our dairy animals as well, because if we're adding more fat to those animals, then they're just not going to be nutriently balanced and doing the right thing, right? And so back to these economically important traits. When we feed too much or too little, we're going to mess with all of these things, which really mess with our revenues that are coming into the farm. And we, not only that, if we're overfeeding, we're also messing with the cost and increasing the cost associated with these traits. All right, Homero, we're ready for our last poll.
Okay, let's go.
Which traits are economically important? Male to female ratio, final weights, body condition scores, reproductive efficiency, growth rate, carcass merit, adult weight, coat color, weaning rates, weaning weights, reproductive efficiency, and body condition scores.
What is a good male to female ratio?
Well, it depends on the age of the male. Our immature males that are reproductively active, I think we say 1 to about 15, roughly. Our young males that are almost mature, but not quite at maturity, we look at about 1 to 25. And if we have a mature male, then I think we're looking at roughly what, 1 to 50, I think is what we can do. In the survey, though, what the male to female ratio, I was thinking about the babies born male to female ratio. That may not have come out quite as clear. And obviously, I didn't even think of the right thing when you asked me. So there we are. All right, so here's our results. And 74% of you said reproductive efficiency, growth rate, and carcass merit. And great job. That's it. You heard me talk a lot about body condition score. And so that last one, which is weaning weights, reproductive efficiency, and body condition score. So body condition score isn't, I mean, I guess in all roundabout way, every one of these is economically important. But the three that I really focused on in this talk were the reproductive efficiency, growth rate, and carcass merit. And growth rate really takes into account those weaning weights, like it's kind of tied up in that growth rate. And body condition score affects every one of these that we were talking about in here. I found one that tricked them a little bit. All right, so I've got a couple resources for you guys, and then we'll finish up. So I just wanted to say that our MU and LU extensions, University of Missouri and Lincoln University extension specialists, can help you develop feed rations based on the quality of your hay, okay? They also have resources to help you in developing grazing plans to increase quality pasture days, the number of days that we can graze throughout the year, and then help develop breeding schedules that help take advantage of the feeding resources specific to your farm. And really, we're just trying to match the nutrition needs to the lowest price feeds. One other resource I wanted to share with y'all today is this feed stuff finder. And this is a newly, I guess it came out back in this November. But this is a newly stood up website and a partnership from Extension Risk Management, USDA, and MU Extension. And this is kind of a platform for buying and selling feed in Missouri, meaning we've got sellers on here that are posting hay and feed for sale, and buyers can go in and find it. You don't need an account, and you can sort it by the type of feed stuff, and you can also estimate delivery costs in here. And I was a little worried that this wasn't going to be used very much. We've been trying to spread the word of this feed stuff finder, because I don't know about you guys, but one of the things I have the most troublesome time doing is finding somebody selling hay. And so that's why this was stood up. But I just took a screenshot today of all of the posts that are in there, and you can kind of see that it is starting to populate. And so spread the word if you don't mind. Use it, spread the word, and hopefully will connect some buyers and sellers. And I think that was all I had. Sorry, I was distracted by the chat again.
I think very good information. There is a question about what you were offering that is only for Missouri. I mean, about delivering the information to and ration advising is only for Missouri people or also for some other people?
So
Or-
if you don't have resources in your state and your local extension, or those knowledgeable about sheep and goats, because those are the folks that tend to be hard to find. Yes, you can definitely call one of our extension offices, me or Homero or Mohan or, and we can get you in touch with somebody that can help with that.
Yeah,
To develop those feed rations, though, we do have to have a nutrient analysis of your hay or forage, whatever it is you're currently feeding as your roughage.
yeah. And also very soon we had to start a grant from North Central, SARE, that we are going to be having field days, workshops, webinars, at least with 6 states and the North Central, Midwest, North Central. So we are going to be in touch with extension specialists in other states like Kansas, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa, Montana, Illinois, Ohio, several states. So this will be running for 3 years. So hopefully we can have a network and some webinars with several speakers. So I think will be a good time just to be learning one to another from all those times or events that we are going to have. I was asking about that ratio about the male and females, because sometimes, like in other countries, sometimes the problem in reproduction is because you don't have enough time for the male to be covering all the females. Sometimes the ratio is 1 male per 80 females.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes it's a mature male, but sometimes I like the goats and the sheep are seasonal. Sometimes they just go to the next season of the year because the male cannot be covering all of them, and you're losing because now you know one lambing per year. Sometimes you are lambing twice in 3 years, okay, because it's lambing like a 1 year and a half, not every year. Never just getting two lambings per year, okay? Just but it's only because that the people start talking a lot about abortion, about diseases, about no, you don't have you don't have enough males over there.
You worked your mail too hard. You didn't get it all done.
Yeah, right.
It's too much work.
Yeah. So I don't know if the people have any other question. You maybe put it in the chat if you have any other question. But I appreciate very much this talk, Jennifer, because sometimes the economic field puts very difficult concepts and things and a lot of theory, but you are very practical, and I appreciate that. I think all the attendees appreciate that. Your information that can help. Yeah.
I will tell you, Homero, this is probably one of the hardest ones I've had to put together in a long time. I have some general concepts about nutrition, but you know, my production is not generally nutrition based. And then all I could think of is 45 minutes on the cost of feeding pregnant animals, and like, that's either going to be a really boring talk or if we just have like calculators.
Well, yeah, but I think this is very important. Okay, so what will be our next talking, Mohan?
Dr. Salinas, so we'll not have any classes on 12th of February, but we will meet on 19th of February. and it will be, the topic will be care during the gestation.
Who will be the speaker?
Speaker is not fixed yet. We will upload in the Facebook account once the speaker is confirmed.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, well, and thank you for the people that came to the to the webinar, and we are going to keep in touch with the certification. So we have to go for 3 more talks, Mohan.
That's right.
Am I right? So
Yeah.
we are going to have Linda Coffee for those 2 talks, and you also, and some other people. So I think we are going to be very good, and also we are going to be talking about our program during the summer, and there will be a Sedalia in person, and the GOT Expo will be the last days of May at Sedalia, and we are going to have also like 12 classes over there. We are going to be also talking about that, and also we are going to have several workshops about meat cutting. It's not part of this certificate, but we have meat processing. So our next workshop will be the February 23 here at near to Jefferson City, the Carver Farm, and this time will be beef or cattle carcass. We are going to be meeting, and we are inviting some people from Idaho University and from Kansas University to be training us. I will be sending the flyer also probably by tomorrow. So you want to come, you are very welcome. So Jennifer, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise to be part, to accept us part of your team. Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you the next.
Thanks, guys. Bye.